forward to your time of learning that's age-appropriate and helpful for you guys. We are continuing in this series on the final week of Jesus. We've looked at a parade that brought him in. We've watched a time of teaching. We've seen him serving. We've seen him combating the religious. We have watched him sharing what is most important, and that is loving the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. While I was gone, we looked at Jesus washing feet and then teaching his disciples this last week to remain in him. For a branch can only survive if it is connected to the vine. And that to remain in Christ is the only way to live. We'll handle the Lord's Supper at Maundy, Thursday in a couple of weeks that evening. But today I want us to get into Jesus when he prays. We're in the Garden of Gethsemane in Matthew chapter 26 is where we're going to be, verses 36 through 39. But before we get there, I want to pose a question that has rattled inside of my brain for about a month now since I first heard it. The question was this: what if you received everything you prayed for last week? What if you received, and what if a yes was answered for every single thing you prayed for last week? What difference would be made? What difference would be made? Think about it. If you prayed for it, for some of you, no difference would be made because you didn't pray last week. For some of you, your immediate context, maybe you got a good night's sleep on Tuesday. Maybe the pollen count went down a little bit. Maybe you were able to breathe. Maybe you had an open door, or maybe you heard back from somebody you were wanting to hear back from. Maybe you weren't so anxious, or maybe you weren't so depressed. Maybe there were some even bigger things. Maybe a child came to salvation that you've been praying for, whether they are 8 or whether they are 38. Maybe someone showed up to church this morning. Would happen if you got a yes to everything that you prayed for. Maybe you had a conversation. Maybe you had a windfall at work. Maybe you got a raise. Maybe you were safely arriving at some place. But I ask, if everything you prayed for last week came true, how much would it affect the world? Would the homeless that scatter our country and even our city, would they have a home, a place of safety and shelter? Would the people who are sick and hurting and dying, would they be healed? Would those people that are experiencing abuse in their daily life, would they be freed? If everything you prayed for happened, what would it do to affect the world, or would it? Would those that are putting their hope in a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Sikh tradition, would their lives be changed, or do you even think about praying for them? Would orphans have families? Would the lost be found? Would the sick be healed? Will the hurting be helped? Oftentimes our prayers focus solely on us. But as Tom Howe said last week, God is more concerned with your holiness than our happiness. So much of our life is just, God, will you make this better for me? God, will you make this easier for me? God, will you help me sleep? God, will you help me have more abundance than what I already have? But God is more focused on us living in line with His calling and aligned to His way than He is to just spoiling us like a grandfather trying to buy our love. God is not consumed with just trying to keep us happy. He is more consumed with us living in a way that honors Him and points others to Him. God cares way more about the lost being found than He cares about you getting another comma in your bank account. But that's how we pray so often. for just my security, my convenience, my happiness. So as we approach the Garden of Gethsemane, I want us to see what Jesus is praying for. Because does God care about your happiness? Sure, but that's not his main thing. He wants you to be happy. He wants you to delight in him. He wants you to have the desires of your heart, but he wants them to be aligned with his. God desires that you reflect him more than he desires that you have more things. The church often has misunderstood this. And we assume that God is just a vending machine to give us more things. And instead of a God who wants to show the world who he is. So with that said, I want us to flip to Matthew chapter 26. Jesus is 15 hours away from dying. 15 hours away from dying. It's about midnight. In between Thursday and Friday, Cooper asked me, what do I write? And I was like, I don't know. I think just put midnight. Is it midnight Thursday or Friday? I think it's midnight Friday. Okay? So it's the middle of the night. Jesus has gone off to pray. And see, Jesus knows what is coming. He taught early in John chapter 3, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him will have life and everlasting life. Jesus knows what is coming. He has told his disciples multiple times, I am going to be betrayed, I am going to be arrested, I am going to be delivered to the enemy, and I am going to be killed. He knows what is coming. He is not excited about it, as we will see, because the reality of suffering, of pain, of the wrath of God is now on him. It's a moment he knew was coming. It's why he was born. But he's not going to sleep again until it happens. Today's the day. The day that is anticipated, the day that I was sent for. So let's begin to read. Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 through 39. Let me flip there. Most of you are already there. It says this. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. And taking with him Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me, or stay awake with me. And going a little further, he fell on his face and he prayed, saying, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. I want us to pause there. Jesus has left the upper room. He has washed feet. He has taught about abiding in him, and he has introduced the new covenant. It says he goes with his disciples to this place called Gethsemane. Most likely, this is a place that Jesus routinely went to pray. Why do we know that, or why do we think that? Because Judas knows exactly where Jesus will be and where to arrest him. He goes to a place called Gethsemane, which in the Hebrew literally means olive press. He is on the Mount of Olives, so it's an olive orchard. What am I trying to say, Quaylen? Orchard. Those words don't spell the same, all right? And they are very confusing when you try to type them. Do you agree? Thank you. They're wrong in how they're spelled, actually, if you wanted to know. Yes. So thank you, Angie. So we have 2 people agreeing, so it's true. So he goes to that field of olive trees, what we're going to call it. He has 11 disciples with him because Judas has already defected. Then he leaves 8 of them in a place, and he takes 3 with him. And they've been the 3 that have gotten kind of the inner circle view of what's going on, but they're also the 3 in the last few days that have had some real problems with their faith. Peter has disagreed with Jesus, said, you're not going to be killed, not on my watch. And he says, get behind me, Satan, to Peter. James and John are the first ones to go up and say, hey, actually, we want the good seats in heaven right beside you. So can we have them? He takes those 3 with him to this place, where the olive press, where the olives are crushed to make oil, knowing that soon Jesus himself will be crushed to bring forgiveness. He goes to Gethsemane, and he can see Jerusalem most likely from this place. So the Mount of Olives and Jerusalem are similar elevations, and you have the Kidron Valley in between them. And so he probably can see the place where he will be arrested, where he will be mistrialed, unfairly tried, where he will be beaten, mocked, scorned, and where he will be hung on display for all to see. He can see it. And this is what he says. What I want you to see first is there is an honest admission by Jesus. An honest admission. What does he tell his disciples? This is the God of all creation who says, my soul is sorrowful and troubled. Jesus, the Lord of lords, the King of kings, is sorrowful. Other translations say with deep anguish, exceedingly sorrowful, overwhelmed. Jesus is feeling this honestly within his body. Maybe his heart is racing, his stomach is turning, his anxiety may be causing him to shake a little bit. Jesus is overwhelmed by this moment. And we can see that sorrow being tempting for him. Don't do it. Give up. Walk the other way. Save yourself. So what's creating this emotion for Jesus? Yeah, the cross is not envied. Thorns being shoved into his skull, nails being hammered through his hands is not something he's looking forward to. He's seen people crucified before. He knows how gruesome it is. But really what Jesus is mostly sorrowful for is this. He is about to experience the wrath of God fully poured out on him. He is going to experience the wrath of God. The punishment of God that is due to all of us and all of mankind. He is going to experience it. He's known this is what he was to be born for. He knows that he is the perfect, spotless Lamb of God for the sacrifice for all the sins of the world, to break back the curse and to reset that God can be connected with man again. But in this moment, we see the fullness of Jesus' humanity, don't we? Jesus doesn't live a pseudo-life. Jesus doesn't live like, oh yeah, he's pretending to be human. He's not some divine spirit just wearing some clothes like you see in Men in Black or something like that. No, Jesus is fully human with the same emotions that we feel, with the same fears and struggles and disappointments and challenges and sickness that we feel. And in this moment, Jesus admits what he is feeling. Do you have a place to admit your struggles? Do you have a place to admit your struggles, your fears, your disappointments? It was cool just a moment ago. I saw somebody look over at someone else going, you're my person that I admit these things to. I also know that there's some of you in this room that don't have a place to share your struggles. The second, though, I want to follow up on this. I don't have it written. Some of us may go, yeah, I have a place. Maybe it's my spouse. Maybe it's my dear best friend that I've known for ages. Maybe it's a partner that I have at the church, or maybe it's God. Here's my follow-up. Do you admit your struggles? Do you admit your pains? See, there's a difference between having the opportunity to admit it and actually admitting it. There's a difference between saying, I have somebody I can share every detail of my life with, and then actually sharing every detail of your life with them. I hope you have a place to admit your struggles. But I really hope that you take advantage of that place. I've got those people in my life You guys have known me up here on the stage. I'm about as honest as you can be on a stage. It's probably not always good how honest I am. But I can share honestly with my wife anything. I can share honestly with my counselor anything. I've embarked on a relationship with Jordan Shelton in my partner relationship, and I can share with him anything. Struggles, disappointments, challenges. Do you have a person like that in your life? We need them. Even Jesus had to admit what he was feeling. He admits it. In his fullness of humanity, I'm reminded of Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15, where it says this, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness." Maybe you don't have a physical person, but we also have a high priest who is able to sympathize with us, who in every respect has been tempted as we are, and yet he was without sin. Even if you don't feel like you have a tangible person right now, you have a place to go in prayer because Jesus knows your struggle. He was not immune or shielded from pain and suffering. And so why do we expect to be shielded from pain and suffering if God's dearly loved Son wasn't? Life was really hard for Jesus. Many people rejected him, hated him. They will soon spit on him, strike him. And yet we begin to question God's goodness every time that life doesn't go exactly how we planned or desired. Let's look back at verse 39. We have two more points from just that final verse. It says this, and going a little further, he fell on his face and praying, and he said this, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." He has an honest admission to his friends, and then what do we see? We see an honest prayer from Jesus. Remember, he's 15 hours away from dying. This is his last free moment that he has. And what does he choose to do? He chooses to pray. And it is a very honest prayer. God, my Father, he says, will you please take this away? A few things I want us to see from this prayer of Jesus. One, he had a place to pray. Do you have a place that you pray? Do you have a specific place that you pray? I'm trying to create one of those. I operate here at the office. I operate in Christian things, in church things all the time. But it can be so easy to worry about task and not worry about prayer. And so I've created a space in my office where that is where I pray. And it changes my posture, it changes my position, it changes my place so that I can focus solely on God in that spot. He went to the Garden of Gethsemane. He could have prayed in that upper room. He had the reserve the whole night, it seems like. He could have prayed in there where he had eaten, where he had washed feet, but he didn't. He chose this place to go and pray. He has a place. Do you have a place that you pray? Do you have a posture that you pray? He fell on his face to pray. Do you have a posture that you pray? Or do you pray in the same way that you scroll Facebook? Do you pray in the same way that you watch television? Just kind of lean back, relax, lounging, haphazardly there. He had a posture of prayer. He was down. I'm not good at posture of prayer. I'm not. I'll admit it. But I'm trying. Do you have a posture of prayer that you will take part in? Then what do we see in his prayer? He says, my Father. In Mark, it uses the word Abba. It is a familiar term. This is a son to his dad. This is a term that I know you, God. He is showing the intimacy of their relationship. This would have been unheard of for the Jews in Jesus' day because they so revered the name of God. How dare they have a personal God? How do you address God in your prayers, though? Is he Father? Is he Lord? Is he Savior? Do you address him as your boss or as your judge? Do you address him as your friend or as a family? It matters. It matters how you address God. And finally, we get to the honest prayer. If it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Mark says it really interestingly. Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. Jesus prays what he desires. It is an honest prayer. He doesn't have to church it up for God. He doesn't have to make it sound nice or sound fancy. He doesn't have to try to figure out all the rules. No, he just says, God, I am not excited about this. Can there be any other way? Can you please take this from me? Can we save all of these people that I love and that you love in any other way? Because I do not want to do it. We're 15 hours away from me dying, and I just don't, it's too much right now. God, is there any other way? Do you pray honestly? Sorrowfully? Truthfully? Scared sometimes? Jesus knows that soon he will be spat upon. He will be called a blasphemer. He will be bleeding and bloody and broken. And he says, God, I know that you can do all things. Do you hear the faith in his prayer? I know you can. Will you please? Will you? How much would your life change if you prayed with that same faith? God, I know you can. I know you can silence the anxieties that park in my brain. God, I know that you can heal me of the depression that is causing me so much pain and sorrow. God, I know that you can change the situation with my sibling. God, I know that you can work to bring to faith my son or daughter. God, I know that you can answer this joblessness that I'm sitting in. I believe you. Please just do it. How would it change your prayers for healing or for help or for answers if you said, God, I know you can? Will you please? Jesus says, please take this cup. And then we end in our final point today, that last line. So we've had honest admission, an honest prayer, and now we have honest submission. He says this at the end, verse 39, and going a little further, he fell on his face and he prayed, saying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup be taken from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Jesus is saying, not my desires, not my wishes, not my ambitions, not my safety, not my ease, not my preference, but whatever you want to do, God, here I am. Wherever you're going to lead, God, I will follow it. I will submit to your will and to your way. I will obey what you say. I will be faithful to where you call me. I will lay aside all of my own personal pursuits and I will trust in you. Is this how you pray? And is this how you approach God? God, I will share with you honestly what I want, but I am going to trust that your ways are higher, your ways are better, and whatever you say, I will believe, I will trust, and I will do. Are you willing to follow a God who doesn't always give you what you want? Are you willing to submit to a God that doesn't just do what you say? How terrible of a God it would be if he just did what we said. Are you willing, though, to trust a God that doesn't just do what you say? Many years ago, I came up with this that has really helped me. I think it's going to be on the screen. It says this: following God never was, never is, and never will be the easy way. But it's the only way. We all assume that once we sign up for Jesus, everything's going to go well. But for nobody in the Bible did life go easy. Abraham, Noah, not easy. David, not easy. Jesus, not easy. Peter, not easy. Remember last year at Easter we talked about every single disciple was killed because of their faith. It wasn't an easy path, but it's the only path. Will you continue to follow God even when it's not easy? Even when it's not the way that you want? Verses 36 through 39 show us a passage of struggle and submission. If you live this life more than a week, you're going to experience struggle. But will you submit? See, we all struggle. But are you willing to submit to the one that is over all and above all? That's the question. A lot of people try to save themselves in the struggle, fix everything by themselves. But will you submit? In these 4 verses, we see Jesus honestly admit his struggles. We see him honestly pray for something to change. And he hears a no from God. He hears a no. But he still submits even when he hears a no. You may be questioning God's goodness right now because not much is going good in your life. You may be questioning God's way right now because it's not the way that you had written out on your 5-year plan. You may be questioning God's purposes right now because they don't align with your purposes. You may be questioning God's plan because it does not align with your plan. You may even be wondering, like the psalmist did, why are the wicked prospering while I am suffering? But will you submit? So I ask you this morning, will you find a place to honestly admit your situations? Will you pray honestly to God to change things? These are his final moments, and he thought it was worthwhile to pray about it. And finally, will you honestly submit to whatever God calls you to do? I'll finish with this one question. What if God calls you out of your comfort zone? What if he calls you to go somewhere you don't want to go? To work somewhere you don't want to work? Or to stay at a job you don't want to stay at? What if he calls you to love people you don't want to love? And that honestly don't seem very lovable. What if he calls you to speak up? Or maybe to stand down? What if he calls you to go there or to stay here? Will you obey? Will you submit? What if he calls you to lose things that you don't want to lose? Will you still trust and obey? Honestly, obedience to God requires sacrifice. The picture of Jesus is just that. Jesus was only willing to be obedient to God. And that meant laying aside his desires, laying aside his wishes, laying aside his fears. To say, not my will, but yours be done. Will you live in that same way? It's interesting. I'll read this verse. I didn't throw it in because I'm just adding it right now. He says later in verse 42, a second time he prayed, my Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, meaning the suffering, your will be done. God, whatever it takes, I'm yours. And I will follow you wherever you lead me.